the biggest moves in entertainment history. Netflix acquired Warner Bros. For about $72 billion. Now that's equity value. So they're essentially buying the ownership stake. And that's almost around $27 and some change a share. And we're talking about essentially a massive historic deal. Now, keep in mind, there's been a number going around which is about 82.7 billion, but that's not essentially, that's the difference between what they're buying and what they're assuming. So they are buying the 72 billion in equity shares. They're assuming 10, almost 11 billion in debt. So people are combining the debt they're assuming with essentially the equity value for the total amount of the cost. But to be very clear, the ownership and the debt are very different. The debt is something that's being assumed and can be paid over time, as compared to the equity value that's being purchased. So we're looking at about a $72 billion deal, a huge, massive deal. And we're talking about HBO, CNN, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers Studio. We're talking about the DC universe with Batman and Superman and all these other historic IP content. And this matters because Netflix is essentially really changing the game because they were originally, they were organically a streaming service, but now there's so many different streaming services. I mean, they were the leader, but and they had created some original content. They had Netflix originals. They had a breakout with House of Cards, and Stranger Things also had some of a big following as well, or continues to. And they had some other original content. However, historic IP. We're talking about Harry Potter and the DC universe, things that really have a lot of brand value in terms of their IP are now being acquired and integrated. So what is that going to mean? Is that going to mean that we might not have as many things in theaters? Is everything just going to be streaming? Well, Netflix did try to clarify some concerns about the elements of theater. They did say that for some of these initial releases that will be coming out, that they will be in theaters. So, for example, James Gunn, who was formerly with Marvel for the Guardians of the Galaxy and a few other projects, who switched over to DC to lead the DCU. So leading the most recent movie he led was Superman, to kind of rebirth the DC universe and kind of have like a whole new saga universe that will be kind of being campaigned from that. He is supposed to continue, according to Netflix, he's going to stay for some time, or continue to stay with the DCU on those projects, and those initial projects in production will go into theaters. There is a question mark around at what point will these projects go to streaming, but we'll have to see. They also talked about trying to continue like having HBO, the Max, and essentially have like separate accounts in terms of separate apps and things like that. However, that Netflix would have more content, essentially acquire more content on its platform. So a lot of those IPs will be eventually likely integrated on Netflix. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what is done with this. There is a lot of talk about regulation, and that regulators will probably, be looking very deeply into this. Usually it takes about 12 to 18 months for such a thing to get processed. At least that's kind of what it looked like during Disney's acquisition of Fox. I actually don't like to compare this to Disney's acquisition of Fox. I think that it's a bit of a minute example. What I like to look at is the 2009 acquisition of Disney of Marvel. So when Disney acquired Marvel, that was at, I believe that was about a four, it was, yeah, so about $4 billion for acquiring Marvel. And just to get you an idea, Avengers Endgame, just one movie, had a box office of 2.7 billion. So we're talking about essentially one movie that Disney made that made three-fourths in the box office of what it paid for initially in Marvel. So they definitely have benefited from the historic IP of the Marvel franchise and have grown it, and to an extent now, even to a point where some people are saying it's a lot of content, and but all that aside, you can see the power of purchasing IP and giving creative control, because with Disney allowed a lot of creative control and historic focus on those characters. A lot of people were concerned when Disney bought Marvel, oh, that Disney kind of has a different brand approach. They're not really they may not have the same ability to appeal to that young adult and mature audience. And they completely have disproven that, I believe, in the past, decade. So, so I think we'll be curious to see, in terms of Netflix, what are they thinking? Or it sounds like there might be a case where movies may end up being shorter. It'll be curious to see, like, in terms of the relations between, in terms of the casting and some of the other creative, like, components to when it comes to making a movie, how that might change, and if things might be heading towards streaming. So it's just a very, very interesting time. The stock has adjusted for Warner Brothers. Keep in mind that is in alignment as well, since Netflix has made it very clear by the 72 billion deal that they're looking at around a 27.75 with that sort of evaluation for per share. So naturally, the market saying, oh well, if Netflix is saying that that's the value of the share, we're going to need to adjust accordingly. So I think there's no surprises there. I think it's going to be some time. It will probably be about a year and a half, maybe longer. But usually that's what the historical precedent was for Disney's acquisition of Fox, for in which they need to go through all the regulations and different things for this deal. But let's see what happens. Continue to observe it. See if this deal does go through the finish line. There were other competitors that were, trying to get this deal, notably Paramount, which had a lot of vested interest. I mean, there were a lot of different individuals trying to bid for Warner Bros. However, this turned out to work towards Netflix's favor. So yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, as I said, I think Netflix, was the original streaming service, right? So they created. I think we take for granted now with all the different, or I should say, it's easy to take for granted with all the different streaming services now that are available that Netflix was actually the original one. So, it's going to be. I'll be curious to see what they end up doing with it and how they might change and adjust their model. So stay tuned with some further news. On some other notes, I'm continuing to growing on my coaching business. We're looking for people who are doing interested in international fellowships around the world to broaden their global perspective. Feel free to take a look at that in the description, and I'll catch you next video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, guys.